And if you're hearing this, it means you're about to hear what my family tried desperately to hide. 3 weeks ago, I buried the man who raised me, my grandfather, Walter Cole. He wasn't just my grandfather, he was my protector, my guide, my home. And while I stood there, dirt on my hands, silence in my chest, the rest of my family stood off to the side, dressed in black, but smiling with their eyes. They didn't shed a tear. They were already planning what they'd take. You see, I wasn't supposed to matter. To them, I was just the kid Walter took in after my mom died. Just the spare, not a Cole by blood, they'd say. But Grandpa never made me feel like less. He used to say, it's not blood that makes you family. It's loyalty when it counts. And in the end, that counted more than I ever imagined. After the funeral, Aunt Meredith invited me to her house, all warm smiles and fake sympathy. She sat me down in her marble kitchen and told me, Ethan, there's no will. Walter didn't leave anything behind. No instructions. Nothing formal. Just peace. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. But inside, something didn't sit right. Walter Cole was a planner, a man who wrote notes in the margins of his newspaper, who labeled his tools with permanent marker, who made 3 backup keys to every door. There's no way he left nothing. So I asked if I could stop by the house, just to get a few things. Meredith's smile faltered just for a second. Then she said, "Oh, it's being cleaned out. Jackson's handling it." Jackson, my uncle. The one who never visited Grandpa once during his last year in hospice. The one who only ever came around when tax season rolled in. Yeah, he'd be handling it. I knew then they were hiding something. That night, I drove to the house. I still had my old key. They hadn't changed the locks. Not yet. It was like walking through a memory that had been scrubbed clean. Pictures were gone. Furniture rearranged. The air smelled like bleach and lemon. But I didn't come for the furniture. I went straight to the study. Grandpa's study had always been off limits when I was a kid. Heavy oak door, thick carpet, the smell of old books and pipe tobacco. Now it was half empty. The shelves had been cleared. The drawers too, except one. Behind the lowest bookshelf tucked between the frame and the wall was a hidden compartment Grandpa once showed me when I was 15. Inside was a small dusty cassette player. Taped to it was a handwritten note. 3 words. If they lie. My heart stopped. My hands shook. I pressed play. And then I heard his voice. If you're hearing this, Ethan, it means they lied. Meredith. Jackson. I knew they'd try. They always wanted the land, the house, the company, but not you. They never wanted you. I did. You were the one who stayed, the one who listened. You took care of me when no one else showed up. So I'm leaving it all to you, the farm, the business, the estate. You were my real son, Ethan. No matter what they say. I dropped the recorder. I sat there in silence like the floor had just caved beneath me. He remembered. He chose me. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. I just replayed the tape, over and over, and in the morning I called a meeting. I told Meredith and Jackson to come to the old house. I told them I had something to show them. They came smug as ever. I held up the cassette player and said, "You said there was no will. You lied." Then I hit play. They laughed. Meredith rolled her eyes. Jackson said, "You think some dusty old tape changes anything? That's not legal. That's not real." But I knew it was real, because I knew him, and I knew that wasn't the only copy. They thought they could erase me. They thought they could steal everything Walter built and bury the truth 6 feet under with him. But they forgot something. The dead may be silent, but recordings speak. If you've ever been cut out, counted out, or told you don't belong, then you know what this feels like. This is the beginning, and I promise they're not going to like how it ends. If you want to hear the rest of this story, what was on that second tape, what happened in court, and what I found hidden in Grandpa's last letter, then stick around. Hit subscribe, because I'm not done, not even close. The last week I spent with Grandpa, I didn't know it would be the last. But looking back, maybe he did. He was quieter than usual. Not sad, not tired, just watching. Like he was measuring time. Like he was checking off the last few things that mattered before he left. Every morning, I'd bring him tea. He liked it with too much honey and exactly 2 drops of lemon. If I forgot the lemon, he wouldn't say anything. He'd just make this little disappointed grunt. That week, I forgot once. He didn't grunt. He just smiled and said, "You remember the important things. The rest is just noise." I didn't think much of it then, but now it rings louder than anything else. We spent a lot of time on the porch that week. He sat in his old rocking chair wrapped in that faded blue blanket from Mom, the one with the frayed edges he never let anyone wash. We talked about nothing and everything. He told me about the first barn he built with his own hands, about how he and Grandma used to race to finish crossword puzzles, and how she'd cheat by hiding the newspaper. He told me the first tree he ever planted was still on the edge of the south field, and that when he died, he didn't want a marble slab, just a stone under that tree. Simple, he said. I came from dirt. I'll go back to it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood in the hallway just outside his room listening, and I heard him talking. Not to me, not to anyone. Just talking. They'll try to take it, but Ethan'll find it. I left him enough. That's what he said, over and over like a prayer. They'll try to take it, but Ethan'll find it. I wanted to walk in. I wanted to tell him I was there, that I heard him, that whatever he meant, I'd protect it. But I didn't, because a part of me still believed there'd be more time. The next morning, he asked me to bring him a pen and one of those yellow notepads. He spent hours writing something. When I peeked through the door, he covered the page with his hand and said, "Not yet, but soon." That was Wednesday. On Thursday, he made a phone call. I only caught one word, "Davis." I asked who that was. He said, "An old friend, and someone I trust." He never explained further. That night, he gave me the old keys to his study. No ceremony, no speech. Just placed them in my hand and closed my fingers around them. "You'll know what to do with them," he said. I thought he meant for bills or old paperwork. I didn't know he meant the only piece of truth that would survive what came next. Friday came. He didn't wake up. There was no pain, no struggle, just silence, and a chair that rocked slowly on its own as the wind pushed through the porch. I remember standing in that room, my hand still clutching the keys he gave me, wondering what I missed, what else he wanted to say, what the notepad said, what Davis knew. But Meredith and Jackson came the next morning, and everything changed. They were efficient, cold. The house was boxed up within 2 days. The study was locked. The notepad was gone. They told the neighbors he left no will. They told me there was nothing for me. They told the world he died peacefully, and that everything would stay in the family, just not with me. I kept silent, not because I believed them, but because I heard his voice, still echoing. They'll try to take it, but Ethan'll find it. So I started searching, and when I finally found the tape, when I heard his voice saying my name, it wasn't just about the land or the house anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about the only man who ever saw me as more than background noise, leaving me the one thing no one else in that family could ever steal. A legacy. Let them come for it. Let them deny it. Let them laugh. I spent that week listening to a dying man talk like he still had years ahead of him. But now I know he did. Because every time I press play, he lives again. And I remember why I can't stop. Not until the truth is out. Not until the whole world knows what he left behind. After the funeral, they didn't waste a single day. By Monday morning, Aunt Meredith had already changed the locks. By Tuesday, Uncle Jackson was driving Grandpa's truck like it had always been his. By Wednesday, they held what they called a reading. Except there was nothing to read. It wasn't held in a lawyer's office. It wasn't official. Just a gathering at Meredith's oversized house with champagne on ice and smug smiles floating in the air. They sat me at the far end of the table, not next to them, not with them, just near enough to see the show. There was no document, no envelope, no tape, just Meredith holding a folded sheet of printer paper, not even signed. She said Grandpa left it on his desk, said it was the final version. "We found it after we cleaned up," she said, voice sweet as sugar. "It's short and simple. He left everything to us." Of course it was always understood. Jackson chimed in like he was delivering a business pitch. "You know how close Dad and I were toward the end. He trusted me with everything. I was already managing the books, Ethan. This is just..." Continuation. I didn't say a word. Not yet. Because I wanted to see how far they'd go. I asked once quietly. Where's the lawyer? Shouldn't this be, I don't know, official? Meredith gave me this look like I was being difficult. Like I was asking for too much. Oh, honey. Grandpa didn't want lawyers involved. He said family should stay out of courtrooms. Which was funny, because Grandpa loved lawyers. He trusted written words more than spoken ones. He once told me if it's not on paper, it's air. So when they said there was no will, that it was all verbal, that it was understood, I knew right then they were lying. But I kept my mouth shut. I left the house that day with a fake smile, one glass of untouched champagne, and a promise in my head. Find the truth, prove it, and make them choke on their own performance. That night, I called every law firm Grandpa ever mentioned. Most of them hadn't spoken to him in years. Except one, a firm out in Fairfield. Small, family-owned. And the receptionist paused when I gave my name. Are you Walter Cole's grandson? My heart stuttered. Yes, I said. She asked me to hold. 30 seconds later, a man came on the line. His voice was deep, calm, direct. This is Davis Reynolds. I've been expecting your call. I didn't even know what to say. He spoke first. Walter sent me a package 6 weeks before he passed. Sealed, certified, with very specific instructions. What kind of instructions? I asked. There was a pause. Then he said that it should only be opened if you were cut out. That was the moment I knew. The moment every ounce of doubt left me. He planned for this. He knew they'd try to erase me, and he made sure they couldn't. But Meredith and Jackson didn't know that. Not yet. At that point, they still believed they'd won. They were redecorating Grandpa's house, getting the land appraised, taking pictures for a magazine spread. They thought I'd just accept it. But I wasn't after revenge. I was after the truth. Because what Grandpa left behind wasn't just a will. It was a warning. And they were about to hear it whether they liked it or not. They hid the reading. They faked the story. But the real words, the ones that mattered, those were waiting for me, sealed in an envelope and recorded in Grandpa's voice. And once I hit play, there'd be no denying what he wanted. They thought they buried me, but all they did was plant a seed. And it was time to grow something they couldn't control. Stick with me. Next, I'll tell you exactly what Grandpa said in that recording, word for word. And I promise you this, it wasn't just emotional, it was explosive. They changed the locks 2 days after the reading, but they forgot one thing. I still had Grandpa's study key, the original, heavy brass, a little rust around the edge. He gave it to me the week before he died and said, "You'll know what to do with it." At the time, I thought he meant paying bills, sorting papers, maybe organizing old photographs. I had no idea what he meant was, go find the truth before they burn it. So one night just after midnight, I drove back. I parked far down the gravel road and walked to the house in the dark. No flashlight, no headlights, just the moon and my heartbeat. The house was still dead quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt violated, like something sacred had been tampered with. I slipped in through the side door, the one that always stuck unless you jiggled the knob twice, and pulled. It still worked. Inside, everything looked different. The rug in the hallway was gone. The curtains had been changed. Even the smell-bleach potpourri and lies. But I didn't stop to mourn. I went straight to the study. That room was Grandpa's temple. Dark wood shelves, dusty old encyclopedias, a clock that hadn't worked in years, and the same leather chair where he used to sit and hum without realizing it. Except now, the shelves were half empty. The books were out of order, and the desk drawers had been pulled open and left hanging like someone had searched in a panic. They were looking for something, and they didn't find it. But I did, because Grandpa didn't hide things where people expected. He always said, "The best secrets are in plain sight, just behind good wood." So I walked to the far corner behind the third shelf from the fireplace, pulled it forward, just a little, and there it was. A narrow panel of wood cracked at the corner with a notch carved deep enough for a fingernail. I popped it open. Inside was a compartment the size of a shoebox. Inside the compartment was everything. An old cassette player, silver beat up, probably older than me, a cassette tape already inserted, and a note folded once taped to the top. If they lie, that's all it said. 3 words. 3 words that told me everything I needed to know. They had lied, and he knew they would. I stood there in the middle of the study, heart pounding so loud I thought someone might hear it from the street. I held the player in both hands, careful not to drop it. I took one breath, then another. Then I hit play, and then I heard his voice. If you're hearing this, Ethan, it means they've already lied. I always knew they would. Meredith and Jackson. They were never here when it mattered. They cared more about my land than my life. But you stayed? You took care of me when my hands couldn't move and my legs couldn't hold me. You sat with me in silence when I had nothing left to say. So I'm leaving it all to you. The house, the farm, the business, the accounts. Everything with my name on it is yours now, because you earned it. Not through blood, through love. If anyone tells you otherwise, play this. Play it loud. And remind them, I wasn't senile. I was clear. I was sober. And I knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted you. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just stood there, frozen, listening. It was like he was still alive, speaking right to me. My name in his voice. My worth confirmed in words that couldn't be twisted. That tape wasn't just a message. It was protection. It was proof. And it was fire. Because once I played it for them, the lies would burn. I knew this wasn't enough by itself. Not in court. Not legally. But it was the beginning. And somewhere deep down, I knew Grandpa wouldn't have left just one copy. He was smarter than that. He was never careless with the things that mattered. And I mattered to him. So I slipped the tape into my jacket pocket, turned off the lights, and left the study exactly how I found it. Except now, I wasn't just grieving, I was hunting. And the hunt was about to lead me to someone I'd never met, but who Grandpa trusted with everything. A lawyer, a man named Davis Reynolds. And whatever Grandpa had sent to him, it was going to finish what this tape started. I didn't sleep that night. I must have played that tape 15 times just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. His voice, his words, my name. It was real, not a dream, not a fantasy, not a memory twisting itself into hope. It was him. Clear, confident, intentional. I kept thinking about how he said it. Play it loud, like he knew they'd deny it. Like he knew I'd need to make them hear. But as powerful as the tape was, I knew one thing. A cassette recorder wasn't going to hold up in court. Not with Meredith and Jackson. They had money, lawyers, influence. They'd twist anything that wasn't ironclad. And they'd bury me under paperwork and smirks if I didn't show up prepared. That's when I remembered the name he'd whispered during his final week. Davis. So I dug through every drawer in the trailer I'd been renting. Bills, letters, junk old envelopes, and finally an address. Reynolds and Associates, Fairfield County line. It was 2 hours away. I didn't call. I just got in the car and drove. The office was small, no glass walls, no modern lobby, just a wooden sign and a receptionist with a kind smile and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. When I said my name, she paused, then stood, and said 5 words that stopped my heart cold. Mr. Reynolds has been expecting you. I followed her down a quiet hallway. Davis Reynolds looked nothing like what I expected. He wasn't slick. He wasn't showy. He wore an old vest, wire-rimmed glasses, and a look like he'd been through too much life to be impressed by anything anymore. He didn't offer small talk. He just said, "You're Walter's boy." And I said, "Yes, sir." Then he stood, walked to a file cabinet, and pulled out a thick, sealed envelope. Stamped, notarized, dated 6 weeks before Grandpa died. He placed it on the table like it weighed 100 pounds. He told me if your name didn't appear in the will the family read to you, I was to give you this. Not before, not after, only when you were ready. I told him I was ready. He handed me a small letter opener, said, "I haven't opened it, but I can tell you it's legal, and it's binding." My hands were shaking. I slit the envelope open and pulled out 3 things: a handwritten letter, a signed declaration, and a second cassette tape, brand new, labeled in Grandpa's handwriting. "Final will, Ethan copy." The letter was addressed to me. Just one page. Ethan, if you're holding this, I'm gone. I hope you found the first tape. If not, this one will say the same. I left this second copy with Davis, so no one could destroy the truth. You earned this, son. Not by blood, but by being better than blood. Fight for it if you have to. But know this, I chose you. I read it twice. Then I handed the declaration to Davis. He read it in silence, then nodded. This will hold up in court. We placed the tape in a new player and pressed play. And once again, his voice filled the room. Only this time I wasn't alone. To whom it may concern, I, Walter Eugene Cole, being of sound mind and judgment, do hereby declare this my final will and testament. I leave all property, assets, business holdings, and land to Ethan James Cole, my grandson by heart, if not by blood. To my daughter Meredith and son Jackson I leave nothing. I wish them no harm, but I leave them no reward for absence, neglect, or greed. This is not written in anger. It is written in clarity, and with love for the one who was there when it counted. This recording shall serve as legal reinforcement of the document attached, and is to be played in court should any question arise about my intent. I trust Davis Reynolds to ensure my voice is not silenced, and I trust Ethan to carry my name forward. If you are hearing this, then truth has already begun. When the tape ended, I couldn't speak. Davis just nodded slowly and said, "He didn't just leave you a message. He left you a weapon." He was right. I didn't walk out of that office with a cassette. I walked out with proof, with clarity, with power, and I knew what I had to do next. Meredith and Jackson thought they'd closed the door, but Grandpa's voice, his will, was about to knock it off its hinges. The next time they saw me, I wouldn't be asking questions. I'd be delivering answers. Stick with me, because next I'm going to play the tape in front of the people who tried to erase me. And let me tell you, they did not see it coming. I thought about waiting, about getting a lawyer first, about filing things properly, about doing it the right way. But the truth is, I didn't want justice on paper. Not yet. I wanted to see their faces when they heard his voice. I wanted to look Meredith in the eye when she realized she wasn't the smartest person in the room anymore. I wanted to watch Jackson's smirk crack when he realized he'd underestimated me. So I called them. One text. No explanation. Come to the house. I found something. They didn't even question it. They thought I was still desperate, still looking for scraps, still small. They arrived together. Jackson behind the wheel of Grandpa's truck like it had always been his. Meredith stepped out in heels like she was headed to brunch, not a battlefield. "Ethan," she smiled. "You look tired?" "You look like guilt," I said. We walked into the house together, back into the study. They didn't notice how much calmer I was. They didn't ask what I had. They sat. I stood, and I pulled the tape recorder from my jacket, the same one I found behind the bookshelf, the same one Grandpa recorded his last truth into. Jackson scoffed. "What's that story time?" "It's Grandpa," I said. "The real Grandpa. The one who didn't leave this house in the hands of liars." He stood up. "Don't start playing games, Ethan. This is over." "Not yet," I said. And I hit play. And just like that, he was back. "If you're hearing this, Ethan, it means they've already lied." Meredith blinked. Her mouth twitched, but she said nothing. "Meredith." "Jackson, you were never there when it mattered." Jackson took a step forward. I held up my hand. "I leave the house, the farm, the business, everything to Ethan James Cole. Not because of blood, because of love." And then, silence. Except the kind that screams. Jackson grabbed the player. "This is a joke. This doesn't prove anything." He looked for a way to turn it off, to eject it. But Meredith finally spoke. Her voice was different this time. Flat. Cold. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter?" I said. "It's his voice. It's his words. And there's another copy with a lawyer. Signed. Dated. Legal." She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. But her silence. That was the tell. They weren't shocked that there was a tape. They were shocked that I had it. "You're bluffing," Jackson said. "You've always been the weak one. Grandpa gave you food and a roof, and you think that means he loved you." I didn't respond. I just hit play again. This is not written in anger. It is written in clarity, and with love for the one who was there when it counted. When the tape stopped the second time, Jackson lunged. He didn't touch me, but he got close enough to show what was underneath all that ego. Fear. We'll see what a judge thinks he spat. We'll tear this apart. Meredith stood calmly, placing her purse on her arm. Good luck with that, I said, because I'm not the one lying under oath. They left. No slamming doors. No yelling. Just quiet. Dangerous quiet. But I didn't feel small anymore. I didn't feel like an intruder. I felt like the only person in that house who actually belonged there. They thought I was bluffing, but I wasn't. They thought the tape was all I had, but it wasn't. They thought it ended in that room. But it was only beginning, because I wasn't just Ethan anymore. I was Ethan Cole, the legal heir, named, chosen, prepared. And the next time we'd face each other, it would be in front of a judge, with the whole truth on full volume. They had all the money, all the confidence, all the fake paperwork. But I had one thing they didn't. Grandpa's voice. And now, so would the court. The first time I walked into a courthouse, I wasn't holding fear. I was holding Grandpa's voice. The world inside was cold marble floors, fluorescent lights, voices echoing off stone. But none of that shook me, because the truth was heavy in my pocket, and I was ready to carry it into the light. The receptionist asked who I was there to meet. I said one name, Davis Reynolds. She nodded. Didn't even ask for spelling. He came out 5 minutes later holding a leather folder like it held the final page of a story he'd read too many times. Ethan, he said, we're going to end this. We didn't walk into some grand trial. Not yet. This was probate court. Paperwork. Signatures. It's not about truth here. It's about documents. About what can be proven. But I had both. Davis handed over Grandpa's signed letter. The original will. The notarized audio transcript. And the tape. Meredith and Jackson weren't there. They sent a lawyer, some tall, confident man in an overpriced suit who smiled too much and blinked too little. He called me the boy. He said things like lack of legal standing and unverified audio. He spoke like this was already won. Davis didn't argue. He just placed the envelope on the table and pressed play. And once again, Grandpa spoke. To whom it may concern, this is Walter Eugene Cole. There was no emotion in the room. But there was weight, because the tape played clean, clear, direct. No confusion, no slurs, no stumbles. No question that the man speaking knew exactly what he was saying and why he was saying it. When it ended, Davis added just one sentence. This recording matches the handwritten will. Both are dated. Both are witnessed. Both declare Ethan Cole the rightful heir. The other lawyer asked to step out. He needed to review. He didn't return for 45 minutes. When he did, his tone had changed. We need time to validate the authenticity of this material, he said. Until then, nothing should be transferred. Davis smiled, not smug, not loud, just calm. Of course, but just know if you challenge this in court. We play it again. They weren't ready, because it wasn't just one tape. Grandpa made two. One was in my hand. The other had already been submitted quietly, legally and officially to the court registry 2 weeks before he died. He made sure that no matter what they tried, his voice would survive. We left the courthouse with no final ruling. Not yet, but we didn't need one that day, because the other side now knew something they didn't know when they walked in. This wasn't hearsay. This was iron. I drove home that night with the windows down, not because it was warm, but because I could finally breathe. For the first time since Grandpa passed, I felt like I wasn't just grieving him, I was honoring him. He knew the wolves would come, but he also knew I'd be ready, and he knew exactly who to trust with the truth. Davis Reynolds, the man they never saw coming, not because he was loud, not because he was flashy, but because he was prepared. The next hearing was in 2 weeks, a formal review. And Meredith and Jackson would have to show up in person this time. They wouldn't be able to hide behind lawyers and forge documents. They'd have to sit, listen, and watch everything they stole begin to slip through their fingers. 2 days after the court hearing, I got a call from Davis. No small talk, just one sentence. Ethan, there's one more thing. He asked me to meet him at Grandpa's house. It still felt strange calling it that Grandpa's house when technically it was mine now. But the name felt safer with him. Like calling it mine too soon would jinx it. Like I still had to earn it. Davis was already inside when I got there. He was standing in Grandpa's study next to the old portrait that had always hung crooked. He told me about this, Davis said, not turning around. Said if things got ugly, if the tape didn't work, I'd find what I needed behind his face. He reached behind the frame and clicked something I'd never seen before. The portrait swung forward like a hidden door, revealing a narrow steel safe embedded in the wall. Combination lock, dusty, untouched. "Do you know the code?" Davis asked. I didn't think. I just said the first numbers that came to mind. 6, 19, 94. June 19th, 1994. The day I moved in with Grandpa. The day he told me, "You're home now, Ethan." The lock clicked. The door opened. Inside was a single envelope. Not thick, not stuffed with documents or deeds or forms. Just one envelope slightly yellowed with time and Grandpa's handwriting on the front. To Ethan. If it gets bad. I didn't open it there. I needed to read it alone. So I thanked Davis, took the letter, and walked out the front door like I was carrying something sacred. Because I sat on the porch, same old wooden planks, same wind pushing through the fields, and carefully tore the top. Inside was the last thing I ever expected. His words, not legal ones, not formal, not protective, just honest. Ray, human. Ethan, if you're reading this, I assume the worst has happened. And if I'm right, I'm sorry. I always wanted to believe Meredith and Jackson would rise to the moment, that they'd remember blood meant something, that they'd come back not for my things, but for me. But I was wrong. Again, you were the one who stayed, the one who stood beside me when I was too weak to stand alone. You didn't ask for anything, and still, I'm giving you everything. Not because you need it, but because you deserve it. I'm proud of you. I probably didn't say that enough, but I want you to hear it now, even if it's just in ink. They'll fight. They'll lie. They'll throw every trick they know. But you hold the truth. And the truth doesn't lose sun. Whatever happens, win or lose, don't become like them. Don't let this house or this land or this legacy turn you bitter. It was never about the things. It was about the honor of who carries them next. Carry it well, Ethan. I love you. Grandpa. I didn't move for a long time after I finished. Just sat there, holding that letter like it was the only thing keeping my hands from shaking. He knew. He saw it coming. All of it. And he still chose kindness over revenge, truth over noise, me over everything else. That letter wasn't just emotional. It was powerful, because it was the final piece. The piece that connected his heart to the courtroom, his why. And that's something no lawyer could argue against. I made a copy and gave it to Davis the next day. He added it to the growing file. One more nail in the coffin of their case. And when Meredith and Jackson finally walked into court for the formal hearing, they walked into a room where their lies had already been outlived. You can fake a signature. You can hide a document. You can even convince people a man never left a will. But you can't fake love. And you can't silence a voice that planned for every twist. I walked into the courthouse that morning not as a guest, but as a name, Ethan James Cole. Heir, grandson, witness to the truth. And this time, they were there too. Meredith dressed in a tailored black suit, hair pulled so tight it looked like it hurt to blink. Jackson chewing gum like it was a defense strategy, both flanked by 2 lawyers each. And then, there was me. Just me, and Davis. But I wasn't afraid, because I wasn't walking in alone. I was walking in with Grandpa's voice, and a letter in my jacket that carried more weight than any file in that room. The judge was an older woman, calm eyes, no time for games. She asked everyone to keep it civil. The other side tried to begin with technicalities. They challenged the audio, challenged the dates, challenged my relationship with Grandpa. Your Honor, mister? Cole was not biologically related to the deceased, one lawyer said smugly. He was taken in, yes, but there's no formal adoption, no blood link. And the original paper will presented by the family. That's when Davis stood up. Respectfully, Your Honor. That document was never filed legally. It has no witness, no signature. It contradicts the deceased's signed notarized letter and his recorded voice. The judge nodded slowly, then looked at me. Mr. Cole, do you have the recording? I reached into my case, pulled out a USB drive, not just the tape, the full digital copy time-stamped and matched to Grandpa's ID by voice authentication. Yes, Your Honor. And the written declaration to match. She motioned toward the bailiff. Let's hear it. And just like that, Grandpa walked back into the room. To whom it may concern, I, Walter Eugene Cole, being of sound mind and judgment, do hereby declare this my final will and testament. I leave all property assets and personal belongings to Ethan James Cole, the only person who stood beside me until the end. I do this without regret, without hesitation, and without apology. If my children Meredith and Jackson are hearing this, know that I saw your absence, and absence speaks louder than blood. You could hear a pin drop. Even Jackson stopped chewing. Meredith's face didn't move, but I could see her foot tapping beneath the table, fast, frantic, fake calm, cracking. The judge didn't say a word. She let the recording finish. This recording exists to remove all doubt. It is not emotional. It is legal. It is final. I chose Ethan because Ethan chose me. End of recording. The tape clicked off. Silence. Then the judge spoke. Is there any evidence to counter this, Will? The room was still. Meredith's lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. Because no paperwork, no clever argument, no bloodline could overpower the sound of a man speaking truth from beyond the grave. The ruling was short. Final will accepted. Assets transferred. Claim dismissed. Just like that. It was done. They stood up. Didn't even look at me. Meredith walked out first, stiff, unreadable. Jackson followed, muttering curses under his breath like it was someone else's fault. But me, I stayed seated for a moment, because I wasn't celebrating. I was just breathing. Finally, Davis leaned over and whispered, "He'd be proud of you." I didn't respond, not because I disagreed, but because I knew it too deep to say it out loud. Walking out of that courtroom wasn't a victory march. It was something quieter, something older. It was the sound of a legacy falling back into the right hands. The way Grandpa intended, not with fists, but with facts. Not with shouting, but with silence. The kind of silence that wins. They didn't speak to me after the verdict. Not in the hallway. Not on the steps outside the courthouse. Not even in the parking lot where Jackson stood smoking a cigarette like he was trying to burn the whole moment away. But silence doesn't mean surrender. Not with people like them. 2 days later, I got a notice. Meredith had filed an appeal. She claimed mental instability in Grandpa's final months. Said the recordings were coerced. Said I manipulated him. Said I was a glorified caretaker with ambition. It was laughable, but also infuriating. Because even after hearing his voice spell everything out word for word, they still couldn't accept the truth. They didn't want the land. They wanted the control. And I was the final thing standing in their way. Davis called it a last gasp, said it wouldn't hold. The judge already ruled. The appeal's a smokescreen. Don't let it shake you. I tried not to, but that kind of venom seeps deep if you're not careful. So I drove back to the house. Back to the place where all of this began. Not to hide, not to react, but to remember. I walked through each room barefoot on the hardwood floors Grandpa built himself. The hallway still creaked in the same spot it always had. The study still smelled like old paper and pine. And the kitchen still echoed with the ghost of his morning whistle. But it was the porch that called me. That rocking chair, that view, the exact place where I first heard him say, "You're home now, Ethan." I sat there for a while. No phone, no plan. Just the wind and the wood and a wait. I wasn't quite ready to drop. Then something strange happened. Neighbors started showing up. First it was Mrs. Boone from down the hill with a pie and a hesitant smile. "Your grandpa used to bring us tomatoes in the summer," she said. "He said they tasted better when they were given away." Then came the Murphys' 2 kids holding a basket of lemons. Then Mr. King with an old photo of Grandpa helping rebuild the church roof in '89. They didn't come to congratulate me. They came to remember him. And they came to remind me. This house wasn't just his legacy, it was ours. Meanwhile, Meredith and Jackson tried one last card. They filed a restraining order against me. Claimed I threatened them, that I harassed them, that I manufactured evidence. It didn't hold. The judge reviewed the original case again, ruled it airtight, tossed the appeal, denied the order, and finally, legally, publicly, it was over. That was the moment everything fell apart for them. Their name, their version, their story, all of it, dissolved. Because when you build your lies on silence, all it takes is one voice, one tape to bring it all crashing down. The news spread through town faster than wildfire. People stopped calling me that boy Walter raised. They started calling me Walter's grandson. No hesitation, no question, just truth. And that meant more than the land, the house, or even the inheritance. That meant I belonged. Meredith sold her condo and left town. Jackson moved to another state. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't need to. They'd already lost what mattered. And me, I stayed. Not out of revenge, not out of pride, but because the roots were already here. And Grandpa didn't build things to be abandoned. People asked me if I ever regretted fighting, if it was worth it, if the weight of it ever felt too heavy. And the truth? Yes, it did. But not as heavy as living with silence. Not as heavy as watching the people you love get erased by greed. Not as heavy as standing at a funeral, surrounded by liars, and pretending not to notice the betrayal under their breath. Grandpa didn't raise me to be loud. He raised me to be clear, to be steady, to know when to speak, and when to press play. The day I moved back in for good. It didn't feel like a victory. There was no ribbon cutting, no dramatic music, no one waiting on the porch with a key and a speech. It was just me, a single suitcase, and a house that had been holding its breath. I walked in slow, shoes off, every step like a memory. This was where I learned how to fix a hinge, where I got my first scraped knee, where Grandpa sat me down after my first heartbreak and said, "Pain doesn't make you weak, son. It makes you honest." The house didn't look like it used to. Meredith had changed the curtains. Jackson had moved the recliner. The pictures were gone, replaced with generic art. But the bones were still there. The smell of cedar. The ticking of the kitchen clock that never kept the right time. The scuff mark on the hallway wall from the time I crashed a toy truck when I was 8. I ran my hand along the banister and whispered, "I'm back. Not for Grandpa. With him. Because everything he left me, the words, the will, the fight, was already part of me now. I didn't rush to fix the house. I didn't call in designers or contractors. I just listened, let the place breathe, let it settle into my rhythm, let it remember me the way I remembered it. And then I found it. It was 3 days in. I was dusting off the old dresser in Grandpa's room, the one he never let anyone touch, when something slid loose behind the bottom drawer. A journal, leather-bound, worn at the corners. I sat down on the floor and opened to the first page. And there it was, his handwriting. Strong, straight, unmistakable. If this ends up in Ethan's hands, then everything went as I hoped. This isn't a legal document. This is for you, son. A man can pass down property. He can pass down money. But what matters most is what he passes down quietly in the way he lived, in what he loved, in what he paid attention to. So here's what I want you to know. And then came pages and pages of thoughts, some simple, some poetic, some like advice whispered through time. Never trust a man who talks over waiters. If you start something, finish it. Unless it's a fight you didn't pick. A clean truck means you don't use it right. But one line stayed with me more than any other. People think legacy is what you leave behind. But it's not. It's what you build that doesn't need your name to survive. I closed the journal and sat in that room for over an hour. No phone, no sound. Just me, him, and the space between. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to just live in this house. I was going to build from it. Not for profit, not for revenge, but for purpose. I started small, cleared the overgrown path to the barn, replanted the vegetable patch he used to call the pride corner, hung the family photos back up, real ones. Not the staged kind. And word got around. People started showing up again, asking about volunteering, asking if I'd ever thought of turning the place into something, a space for kids, for learning, for community. I said yes before they could finish the question. Because Grandpa didn't just raise me, he raised a purpose in me. I called it the Cole Foundation, a place where people who never had a place could finally feel like they belonged. Workshops, gardening classes, mentorship for kids who didn't have a home to go home to. And right above the barn entrance, I carved in wood, "You're home now." The same thing Grandpa said to me. That first night, I arrived as a scared, broken kid with no one left. This wasn't just about reclaiming an inheritance. It was about restoring meaning, rebuilding what greed tried to tear down, replanting what they tried to rip out. They wanted the house. I gave it a soul. It started with a box, old, wooden, tucked away beneath a loose floorboard in the study. I wasn't even looking for it. I'd dropped my keys, bent down to grab them, and felt something shift underfoot, a hollow thump that didn't match the rest of the boards. I pulled it up, and there it was. Not labeled, not locked. Just waiting. Inside were envelopes. Dozens of them, each one addressed to me. Some dated from years ago, some from just weeks before he passed. None of them were ever sent. I sat there for hours reading. His handwriting changed over time from sharp and steady to shaky and slow, but the words never lost their clarity. He wrote to me like I was right there, like he was whispering into the future. One letter dated 5 years ago read, "Ethan, you're getting tall now. I see it in the way you open the fridge, like you own the place. You still think I don't notice when you sneak the cookies. I do, but keep doing it anyway. I like seeing you enjoy things. Makes the house feel younger." I smiled through tears. Then another, from just a few months before the end. "I know you've been carrying more than you let on. I hear it in your silence. I want you to know something. It's okay to rest, to break down, to cry when you need to. You never have to be the strong one for me. I already know what you're made of." And then I found one, different from the rest. Thicker paper, no date, written in darker ink as if he was pressing the words deeper into the page. "Ethan, if this letter finds you after I'm gone, it means you've seen the worst of them. I'm sorry for that. I always hoped they'd change. I gave them more chances than they deserved. But you never asked for anything, and you gave me peace. That's more than most men get in a lifetime. I watched you become a man when no one was watching. I heard you pray when you thought I was asleep. I saw you carry groceries with shaking arms, clean my wounds with shaking hands, and still smile at me like I was the one saving you. You were never just a kid I raised. You were the reason I kept going. And if Meredith and Jackson try to rewrite that story, just know they're already too late. You lived it. I lived it. That's all that matters. I love you. No blood needed. You're my boy. Forever." I don't remember crying. Not exactly. But I do remember holding that letter so tight, the paper almost tore. Because that was the piece I didn't know I still needed. Not the legal proof. Not the public recognition. Just that, to know beyond all the noise. He saw me, not out of obligation, not out of pity, but out of pride. I copied the letters, scanned them, archived them. But the originals, I wrapped them in linen and placed them in the same box, this time on the top shelf of the study, right next to his favorite book of poetry, where they belong. Not buried, not hidden, but honored. I didn't read them all in one day. I wanted to, but I knew better, because they weren't just memories. They were fuel for the work, for the healing, for the future. See, Meredith and Jackson thought inheritance was about money, about things. But Grandpa, he left me something they could never touch. His mind, his heart, his voice. In pages, in ink, in silence made visible. That's the real legacy. And I was finally ready to carry it. People kept asking me the same question after everything settled. "So, what are you going to do now?" At first, I didn't know how to answer. Because when you fight for something that hard, something that personal, it's easy to think the fight is the destination. That once you win, you're done. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because what Grandpa left me wasn't just land, or money, or a house full of old furniture and creaky floors. What he left me was responsibility, and something deeper, something that can't be itemized in a will. He left me his unfinished work, not the farm, not the accounts, not the repairs. I mean the real work, the kind that happens in the quiet, the kind that lives in the way a man shows up when no one is looking, helping, feeding, fixing, guiding. That's the stuff he did best, and that's the part of his legacy they never understood. Meredith and Jackson saw property. They saw profit. They saw legacy as a crown to wear. But Grandpa wore it like overalls, quietly, covered in dirt, useful. And now that it was mine, I knew I couldn't just own it. I had to live it. So I started making calls. To schools, to local youth programs, to food banks. I asked what they needed, what they didn't have, what kids weren't getting. The answers were simple. Time, mentorship, a place that feels safe, someone who listens. And suddenly, the path felt clear. I cleaned out the barn, cleared the weeds, opened the doors wide, started planting again, not just vegetables, but opportunity. We turned the back lot into a teaching garden, built a woodworking shed from old scraps, hung Grandpa's tools on the wall just like he left them. We called it the Walter Cole Center, a place where no one asks where you're from, only what you need. I thought maybe 10 kids would show up that first week. We got 30, then 40. Some came because they had nowhere else to go. Some came because they had heard about the farm with free food. Some came just to sit in silence with their hands in the dirt. All of them stayed. We taught them how to build things, fix things, grow things. But more than that, we taught them how to be still, how to listen, how to be seen. Because that's what Grandpa did for me. Long before I understood what he was doing, sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd walked away. If I'd believed Meredith. If I'd let Jackson's threats shut me down. If I'd never found that tape. It scares me how close I was to letting all of this disappear. Not just for me, but for everyone who needed this place and didn't even know it yet. People tell me I saved the farm. I didn't. He did. With his voice. With his planning. With his belief in someone no one else counted. I'm just finishing the job. The truth is, I don't think Grandpa cared about legacy in the way most people do. He didn't want statues, or headlines, or his name in bold. He just wanted someone to keep things growing, to make sure the ground stayed fertile for the right kind of seeds. And that's what I'm doing. Every day, because inheritance isn't what you receive. It's what you honor. And I've got a whole lifetime to keep honoring him. People kept asking me the same question after everything settled. So, what are you going to do now? At first, I didn't know how to answer. Because when you fight for something that hard, something that personal, it's easy to think the fight is the destination. That once you win, you're done. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because what Grandpa left me wasn't just land, or money, or a house full of old furniture and creaky floors. What he left me was responsibility, and something deeper, something that can't be itemized in a will. He left me his unfinished work, not the farm, not the accounts, not the repairs. I mean the real work, the kind that happens in the quiet, the kind that lives in the way a man shows up when no one is looking. Helping, feeding, fixing, guiding. That's the stuff he did best. And that's the part of his legacy they never understood. Meredith and Jackson saw property. They saw profit. They saw legacy as a crown to wear. But Grandpa wore it like overalls. Quietly. Covered in dirt. Useful. And now that it was mine, I knew I couldn't just own it. I had to live it. So I started making calls. To schools. To local youth programs. To food banks. I asked what they needed. What they didn't have. What kids weren't getting. The answers were simple. Time. Mentorship. A place that feels safe. Someone who listens. And suddenly, the path felt clear. I cleaned out the barn. Cleared the weeds. Opened the doors wide. Started planting again. Not just vegetables, but opportunity. We turned the back lot into a teaching garden. Built a woodworking shed from old scraps. Hung Grandpa's tools on the wall just like he left them. We called it the Walter Cole Center. A place where no one asks where you're from. Only what you need. I thought maybe 10 kids would show up that first week. We got 30, then 40. Some came because they had nowhere else to go. Some came because they'd heard about the farm with free food. Some came just to sit in silence with their hands in the dirt. All of them stayed. We taught them how to build things, fix things, grow things. But more than that, we taught them how to be still, how to listen, how to be seen. Because that's what Grandpa did for me, long before I understood what he was doing. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd walked away, if I'd believed Meredith, if I'd let Jackson's threats shut me down, if I'd never found that tape. It scares me how close I was to letting all of this disappear. Not just for me, but for everyone who needed this place and didn't even know it yet. People tell me I saved the farm. I didn't. He did. With his voice, with his planning, with his belief in someone no one else counted. I'm just finishing the job. The truth is, I don't think Grandpa cared about legacy in the way most people do. He didn't want statues, or headlines, or his name in bold. He just wanted someone to keep things growing, to make sure the ground stayed fertile for the right kind of seeds. And that's what I'm doing. Every day. Because inheritance isn't what you receive. It's what you honor. And I've got a whole lifetime to keep honoring him. If you had told me a year ago that this land would be full of laughter again, that the barn would echo with the sound of hammers and hope, that the house would smell like fresh bread and dirt and joy, I wouldn't have believed you. Back then, this place felt like a grave, like a war zone of silence and betrayal. But now it feels alive. Not because of me, but because I stopped trying to restore what was and started building something new. Every corner of this place holds a memory. The porch swing, Grandpa fixed 3 different times because I kept jumping off it midair. The spot in the kitchen where I broke a plate and cried like I ruined the whole world, and he just ruffled my hair and said, "Now you know how it feels to let go." The attic where I used to hide thinking nobody cared. Until I found out he used to check it every night just in case I was there. That's the foundation I'm building on. Not stone. Memory, not inheritance. Meaning. The Cole Foundation has grown. We're not just mentoring kids anymore. We've started classes for veterans who need grounding, gardening therapy for trauma recovery, weekend workshops for single parents who want to learn how to fix a faucet or build a birdhouse with their kid. We host dinners now, long tables under string lights right in the field where I used to mow the grass with headphones on. And sometimes when everyone's gone and the night is quiet again, I sit on the porch like he used to, and I listen, not for the wind, not for the trees, but for him, and I swear, sometimes I hear it. I've stopped trying to make sense of why Meredith and Jackson did what they did. That bitterness, that hunger for power without purpose, it's a fire that eats from the inside. And I don't have time to burn. I've got too much planting to do. Too many kids who need someone to say, "You matter." Too many lost boys who need to hear what Grandpa once told me. "You don't have to be blood to belong." That one line changed my life. And now I say it every week. To someone new, to someone broken, to someone who's one sentence away from quitting. You don't have to be blood to belong. It's not just a belief. It's a way of living. A reporter came by a few weeks ago, said she heard about what we were doing. She asked for a tour, took pictures, asked how it all started. And I just smiled and pointed to the barn. With a man and a tape recorder, I said, "And a whole lot of love." She didn't get it. Not really. But that's okay. Because some stories aren't meant to be summarized. They're meant to be lived. And I'm living mine now. Not chasing ghosts. Not proving anything. Just showing up like he did. It's strange how something so small, so ordinary, can hold everything. A tape recorder. Plastic. Dusty. The buttons sticking just slightly when you press down. And yet, that little machine held more power than every paper Meredith ever forged. More truth than any speech Jackson ever rehearsed. That tape changed my life. Today, for the first time in months, I pressed play again. Not because I needed proof. Not because I was preparing for court. Not because I was angry. But because I missed him. Because I wanted to hear him say my name one more time. Because now, I could finally listen without grief blinding me. And when his voice filled the room, calm, steady, certain, I didn't cry. I just smiled. If you're hearing this, Ethan, it means they lied. He was right. They did. You were the one who stayed. I did. I'm leaving it all to you. He did. And I carried it. Not just the land. Not just the legacy. I carried the meaning. I used to think the tape was the end of their story. That pressing play would destroy what they tried to steal. But now I realize It wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of mine. Because that tape wasn't a weapon. It was a torch. Handed to me from a man who'd spent his whole life planting light in the dark and needed someone to keep it burning. And I did. Every workshop, every harvest, every late-night letter I write to the kids who come here looking for a second chance. That's me pressing play again. Over and over, on something bigger than inheritance, bigger than revenge, bigger than blood, truth. The final lines of the tape are the ones I always come back to. You don't have to be blood to be chosen. You don't have to be loud to be strong. You just have to love someone, enough to stay when it's hard. He stayed, so I stayed. He chose me, so I chose to build. He left me a voice, so I gave it a purpose. And now to you, the one listening, if you've ever been cut out, counted out, overlooked, if you've ever felt like your story didn't matter because someone else had more money, more status, more power, let me tell you something. The truth always finds its voice, even if it has to wait, even if it takes years, even if it's buried behind shelves and hidden in safes and whispered into recorders that collect dust. It will find you. All it takes is the courage to press play. This was my story. But if it spoke to you, if you felt something while listening, then maybe it's your story too. And if you want more stories like this, about truth, about justice, about the quiet kind of strength that doesn't always make headlines, then do me one last favor. Subscribe. Hit that button. Stick around, because we're just getting started. And I promise you, there are more voices waiting to be heard. If this story spoke to something inside you, subscribe, share, let someone else feel seen today. Your voice matters, and it's time to use it.